Today, we're going to tackle the absolutely incredible 400-year story of New York City. And let me tell you, it's a wild tale of constant crisis, reinvention, and just unstoppable growth. All right, so let's just start with the sheer scale of New York today. I mean, we're talking about a true megalopolis, more than 8.3 million people packed into its five boroughs. And it's not just big, it's unbelievably diverse. I mean, think about this. On any given day, you can hear almost 180 different languages on the streets. It's just staggering. So that begs the question, right? How in the world did this happen? How did a tiny little Dutch trading post, obsessed with beaver pelts, somehow transform into the sprawling global capital of the world we know today? That's what we're here to unpack. Okay, Act 1. Let's rewind all the way back to the very beginning. We're talking about the journey from the native Lenape land, known as Mannahatta, to the founding of a brand new European colony. You know, those early years were an absolute whirlwind. Things happened so fast. You've got the first European sighting in 1524. Then Henry Hudson and the Dutch show up in 1609. Then you have the famous, or maybe infamous, purchase of the island in 1626. And get this. Just a few decades later, the English just sail in and take the whole thing over. And the crazy part? Not a single shot was fired. So when the Dutch set up their colony, New Amsterdam, they weren't building a city on a hill for religious freedom or anything like that. Nope, this was a pure, unadulterated business venture. From day one, it was all about one thing, the fur trade. That profit motive was baked into the city's DNA right from the very start. And here's a perfect example of how the city just constantly evolves. Back then, to protect themselves, the Dutch built a simple defensive wall. Just a wall. Well, that very path, which was basically the edge of their known world, is now, you guessed it, the undisputed center of global finance, Wall Street. Amazing, right? All right, on to Act 2. We're jumping forward to the 19th century. And this is the period when the city didn't just grow, it absolutely exploded. It became the nation's premier #1 port city. So what was the spark? The one big thing. It was the Erie Canal. This thing was a total game changer. When it opened in 1825, this river to riches, as they called it, connected the Atlantic Ocean all the way to the Great Lakes. Suddenly, for the first time, all the goods from America's heartland had a cheap, direct water route to a major port. This gave New York an unbeatable, just crushing advantage over its rivals like Philly and Boston. And you can see the effect of all that business right here on this chart. Just look at the insane velocity of that growth. The population skyrockets from a respectable 60,000 in 1800 to a mind-boggling 3.5 million by 1900. That's not growth, that's an explosion. So where did all these people come from? Well, this boom was powered almost entirely by massive waves of immigration. You had people pouring in from Ireland, Germany, Italy, Eastern Europe, all fleeing things like famine and persecution, all looking for a new life. And they turned New York into this vibrant, chaotic, incredible global crossroads. But you know, for so many of these newcomers, the beautiful promise of the Statue of Liberty, it clashed with a really grim reality. They found themselves crammed into these overcrowded, unsanitary buildings called tenements in neighborhoods like the notorious Five Points. It was a place that became infamous for grinding poverty and violent street gangs with names like the Dead Rabbits and the Bowery Boys. Okay, let's move on to Act 3. We're at the turn of the 20th century now, and this is when New York basically invents the idea of the modern metropolis. So how'd they do it? It really happened in 3 key steps. First, in 1898, you have this massive political consolidation. The 5 boroughs all unite into what they called Greater New York. Then, just a few years later in 1904, the subway system opens, and suddenly this massive new city is all tied together. And third, this incredible new ambition takes hold, sparking a literal race to the sky that gave us the iconic skyline we know, with masterpieces like the Chrysler Building and the Empire State Building. And this innovation, it wasn't just physical. It wasn't just about buildings and trains. The city also became the undisputed media capital of the country. You had these new penny papers, like the New York Herald. They ditched the old stuffy political stuff and instead gave readers what they really wanted, eye-catching stories about crime and scandal. They basically invented modern journalism as we know. And that brings us to Act 4, because this era of what seemed like unstoppable progress, well, It was about to collide head-on with a series of crises that would threaten the city's very existence. The city basically experienced a case of severe whiplash. First, you have the Roaring Twenties, this wild era of decadence. I mean, there were an estimated 100,000 illegal bars or speakeasies during Prohibition. And then, bam, the Wall Street crash of '29. The city is plunged into the Great Depression. You have shanty towns, these so-called Hoovervilles, popping up right in the middle of Central Park. The contrast is just jarring. And the hits just kept on coming. The middle of the 20th century brought this cascade of new problems. You had white flight, where wealthier residents fled to the suburbs, which just gutted the city's tax base. Then the factories started closing down, draining away good jobs. And on top of all that, you had these massive, destructive projects like Robert Moses's Cross Bronx Expressway, which literally tore through the heart of entire neighborhoods. It all came to a head in 1975 when the city was officially totally broke. And the city's absolute desperation, it was captured perfectly in this one infamous headline from the Daily News in 1975. The city went begging to the federal government for a bailout, and President Gerald Ford's initial answer was no. The paper's headline? Ford to city drop dead. That phrase, it became the symbol of New York's absolute lowest point. But this is New York we're talking about, and that brings us to our final act, the story of the city's incredible comeback. This is where it really shows its true identity as a city of unbelievable resilience. So what saved the city this time? Well, it's a theme we've heard before, isn't it? Immigration. After 1965, a whole new wave of people from Asia, Latin America, and the Caribbean began pouring in. They revitalized neighborhoods, they started new businesses, and they breathed new life back into a city that so many people had already left for dead. Of course, that spirit of resilience would be tested like never, ever before, on September 11th, 2001. The attacks on the World Trade Center were, without a doubt, the city's darkest day. But what happened in the aftermath? The way New Yorkers responded with such strength and courage and unity, it just amazed the entire world. So from a tiny trading post to a global metropolis, New York's story has always been about reinvention. It is a city that gets knocked down time and time again, only to get right back up, somehow even stronger than before. So after 400 years of constant crisis and renewal, the only real question left is, what's next?